Hey, welcome back to the Bound by Art podcast. I'm Missi Blue, tattoo artist, business owner, and your guide to navigating the chaos that is the tattoo industry. If you're an artist looking to grow your business, attract the right clients, and learn how to survive this career without losing your damn mind, then you are in the right place. Every week, I'll be bringing real talk, actionable tips, and hard-earned lessons from my own journey with a side of good vibes and a little bit of sarcasm. Whether you're new to the game, feeling stuck, or you just need a kick in the ass to get that spark back again, this is the show for you. Welcome to Bound by Art. Now let's get to work. In case anyone is living under a rock, Gia Rose, crazy talented tattoo artist, been tattooing for 21 years, a mentor, educator, competitor on Ink Master as well as Ink Master Angels. Currently tattooing in New York and Pennsylvania, right?
All over, yeah.
All over.
those are like my home spaces, is
Okay.
northeastern Pennsylvania, and New York City, yeah.
Okay. Soon to be moving, but we'll get into that later. But she calls her style neo-romantic and just an incredible tattoo artist, one of my favorites for a long, long time. Gia, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I appreciate you showing up, even though you have a cold and you're not feeling great.
I'm
You
feeling
look
much better, but
good.
it's definitely at the tail end of the sinus infection world. And I was flying back from England like the day after it hit. I've never flown with a sinus infection before, and I'm
Oh
going to
no.
tell you that now I will always carry Mucinex or Sudafed with me because I was prepared to lose an eardrum. That's how bad it was.
Oh
I was
no.
like, I'm going to lose an eardrum. I was like sitting there, like putting my, like, it was not, do not recommend.
Oh my gosh, I can't even imagine. I remember being on a flight with a woman who she must have had the same thing going on, just bawling like they couldn't do anything to help her. She was in so much pain. So,
Oh, they're bad. They sell
ugh.
things now, I think, that like prevent it. It's like these weird little twisty things, but
Oh,
I don't know. They're called airplanes.
okay.
Way off topic.
And that's the show for today, guys.
Ta-da! It's an ad for
But
airplanes.
but thank you so much for being here. I appreciate
Thank
you
you
so
for
much.
having me.
So I sent you out like a little questionnaire just to kind of get an idea of like what to talk about today. And one of the things that you mentioned in it was you kind of fell into tattooing by accident. And I'd love to hear what that means. Tell us like your little backstory and how you fell into tattooing.
So it was kind of like right place, right time. And in that time frame in the tattoo industry, if you weren't around during that time, it was very, very different. Social media didn't exist. The internet was barely kind of a thing. I don't even know if MySpace existed. Like there was nothing, you know what I mean?
We started around the same time. So I've been tattooing 21 years also.
Yes,
So
you remember.
I I don't even think there was MySpace.
No, I don't
No.
think so. There
Or
was
if
nothing.
there was, I didn't know about it.
No, social media was just not a thing.
Yeah.
I didn't even have a cell phone. We didn't have like I still, you know what I mean, like that era. And so tattooing was very different, you know, like it was very shop centric. You know, at the time the most anyone would get in the industry, quote unquote, like if that's even really a thing, like I mean it is and it isn't. And we can go into that in my beliefs if you ever want to, but you know, the most you would ever get is like maybe a mention in the in like some tattoo rag magazine next to the, I don't know if I can say this, but porn section, like
Yeah.
yeah, that was, or like a trucker, that was it.
Yeah.
So I was living in Asheville, North Carolina. I grew up in the punk scene in Michigan outside of Detroit, and I had spent a couple years riding freight trains, and so like I like was done with that part of my life, and I was living in like this kind of punk community, and one day there was this chick that was over, and she kind of had like a crush on my roommate, and like kind of just started making small talk with me, and I was just like doodling and sketching, and I've always drawn, and she just randomly was like, "Have you ever thought about tattooing?" Because I had some tattoos, but they were like I had a tattoo on my hand. I had some tattoos that were mostly from the punk scene, and then riding trains. And I was like, no. And she was like, well, I know someone who's looking for an apprentice. And I was like, cool. And so she like told me where her shop was, and it was this woman, Miss Kitty Love. She had this shop, this private studio at the time, which was really rare, called Sky People Tattoo. And I like went in and she was more interested in me as a person rather than my art skills. And again, at the time, the art wasn't really a big part of tattooing. Like
Right.
it was, but it wasn't.
Yeah.
She was doing a lot of custom stuff, and that was kind of unheard of. Those were still the like really flash days, traditional tattooing. Um, so it was more of a trade, like more focused, trade focused, I think, at least in my experience. And so she took me on, and I did a traditional apprenticeship, so making needles, mixing pigments, building machines, like all of that stuff.
All that hateful stuff that we don't have
All
to
of
deal with anymore.
Yeah, well, it's like, at that again at that time, like half of the quality of your tattoo was mastering your own equipment.
Yep, absolutely.
So it was like, if you didn't make great needles,
Yep.
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you're literally like, and when we say making needles, it's like you bought every individual needle
Hmm.
and then you grouped them together in the formations that were trade secrets, and then soldered them together and then soldered them onto bars and then sterilized them. Like that's how unique it was. Like like nothing was pre-made. I think pre-made needles on bar had kind of just come out at that time, because I remember there was a lot of talk in shops and tattooers being like, that's not how you do it. Pre-made needles, what is this? You know what I mean? Do
Yeah.
you remember that like that
Hmm.
was the like at that time it was like, who would ever do this?
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. So
But yeah.
you say your apprenticeship was pretty traditional. I'm interested to hear what that was like from a female mentor.
So it was awesome. I mean, it was tough. Like it's not easy, and and then from there I went and worked. Like I finished my apprenticeship after the year, and I moved because at the time it was like, again, if you didn't really hang in, some people hung in shops for long periods of time, and some people didn't. If you wanted to learn to get better or whatever, you would go and move, and you'd have to work with other artists to learn anything new.
Mhm.
And so when I left her, I got a rude awakening to how the tattoo industry really is.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like it was kind of like, but my apprenticeship with her was still hard. Like I worked a full-time job. I was at the shop as well, like, at least 20 hours a week.
What
You
was
know,
your full-time job?
I worked at two bars. So I
Okay.
worked nights.
As a bartender?
No, I worked in a kitchen washing
Okay.
dishes.
Nice.
And then another place doing like bar backing. And then when I left there, I went to New Orleans and then got like kind of like a little bit of an extra apprenticeship. I worked at Crescent City Tattoo, which doesn't exist anymore because of Katrina. And then I worked at two bars there, bar backing and bartending. And that was the rude awakening to the
Yeah.
different culture. But with her, it was still a lot of work. You make, I don't know, 150 needles, and she comes in and you sterilize the ball. You've put in all this work, you've made all these needles, and then she like opens each packet and like pops off every single needle you made because they weren't soldered correctly. Because they can't pop
Oh,
off while you're tattooing. And
right.
that's part of teaching. So it's like a
Hmm.
lot of the traditional kind of like you work, and the things you're working and doing are teaching you. You know what
Hmm.
I mean? And I think
Yeah.
people kind of forget that. Like when you're doing things, you're learning.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So let's just back up for a second and just describe, because I feel like most of my listeners are kind of younger in their tattoo careers and don't realize what this actually means to for you, a female, to be mentored by a female. Because back then, I don't know how it was in your area, but in my area, I didn't know of any other female tattoo artist. I
No.
was the only one. And it was unheard of, and people would constantly think that I was the front desk help, or that I I had somebody ask me like, "Oh, do you draw the pictures on the walls?" I'm like, "No," because I'm sitting there drawing, right? "Do you draw the pictures on the walls?" "No, I'm drawing this for a tattoo." "Oh, you draw the tattoos for the artists?" Like, "No, I am the artist." But it was just like so like foreign to them. They were like, "What do you mean you're the artist? Like you do the tattoos?" I'm like, "Yes." So for you to have found a female mentor is just incredible because it's just kind of it was unheard of back then.
Yes, and I didn't realize that until I left. That's the
Mm-hmm.
thing, is because I kind of went into it on the like she was ahead of her time. Number one, she's still tattooing. She's a great tattooer. And she grew up tattooing from what I recall 80s 90s, you know what I mean? And so she had been tattooing quite a long time when I went to work for her, and learned from her. And she was the one who kind of guided me in this way that was like, because of the world she came up in, the do's and don'ts as a woman, you know what I mean? She was like, never date a tattooer, because you never know who you're going to work for one day.
Mm-hmm.
Like kind of like etiquette as far as like how to conduct yourself. And then it was really focused on art, her kind of custom stuff that she was doing that again I didn't realize until I left wasn't really like she was really kind of ahead of her time. Wasn't really a thing. She was mostly appointment based, but the tools and the skill of the trade was still all a trade skill. You know what I mean? So, but she did have like kind of this very tough exterior. And I remember at the time I was in my early 20s, 2021, and it was she was intimidating as a person. Tattoo shops in general were intimidating. She was somewhat intimidating. And I remember she was also very polarizing, which is quite interesting because I kind of feel that way about myself sometimes. And I would always hear things about her, good and bad. And I remember one of my earliest memories was asking her, like, why people would say, like, I remember we were standing outside of the studio, and I remember asking her something along the lines of, like, why people thought she was such a bitch. And I remember her standing there and she just kind of like paused and looked away for a minute for a long time. And she was like, I think it's because I'm completely comfortable with who I am, the good and the bad. And then she just kind of nodded to herself and was like, yeah, and like walked back inside. And I remember that moment as just being like, I want to be like you one day. Like, I want to feel that way.
That's funny. I remember so before I was tattooing, I worked at Pizza Hut. I was like an assistant manager at a Pizza Hut. And I remember one of the, trainers when I was going through the management training telling me that women in leadership positions, when they're stern, when they're direct, they're seen as a bitch.
Hmm.
And men in the same position are just seen as strong and stern and strict. But it's because you're female, you're a bitch. And
Yeah.
so
It's like
I
a
always,
negative. You're doing the same job, you're operating the same way that, but you are treated very differently and it's kind of a psychological thing because I've noticed it through the evolution of my career as, from apprentice to like mentee to, somewhat of a, adult tattooer, grown up tattooer when you hit the 10-year mark. And then like when you first open a studio, then to boss, like, and then, like all the stages and then how you're treated throughout all of that as a woman is very unique and different, because and you can see it because it's you're comparing it to everybody else, you know what I mean? Like being a owner was one of the hardest things in my life because like having, you know conversations sometimes that are like hard because you're a business and things like that, the backlash that would come back on me was always kind of shocking. You know what I mean? It's like these are just tasks.
it is,
We're in a business.
it is
I'm not
very
asking you to
challenging.
do my laundry. Guess what? I had to do laundry. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
that was my kind of rude awakening. So when I left her environment, like she never had me do things outside of just the work of a shop. You know what I mean? Which was a lot of work. You know what I mean? Like, but that's how you learn. Like setting up, breaking down, making needles, fixing machines, constantly prepping, helping her prep her clients. Like all of that was knowledge, right? So that when you go to do it yourself, you're like learning the hands-on knowledge, you know, like mixing pigments, pulling pigments, organizing ink, cleaning ink. You're familiarizing yourself with what everything's called, what everything looks like. You know what I mean? Like all of that is knowledge. It's not just, you know, free labor. Like that's not how
Right.
it works. And I think a lot of people forget that because of it's a trade, it's a hands-on thing. You
Well, I
can't
think,
read it in a book.
right.
And everything is so unique to the artist you're learning from. You're learning their methods. And so like that's something that I learned from her. It's something that when I take on an apprentice, which I've only had four, that I teach like and I'll tell them, I need you to shake up, clean the tips of all of my ink and then organize them. And I'm telling you to do this not for work, but you're familiarizing yourself with the names, every pigment, what it looks like, so that when you start tattooing eventually, when I ask you to pull a color for me, you're there learning, you know where it is. And then when you start tattooing, you know that color, you know that name.
Right.
Because again, you can't get it in a book.
Right. It's very like Karate Kid, right? So
Oh my God, it is.
so they're doing the things and they're like, why do I have to do this bullshit? Like I just want to learn how to tattoo. And, at the end, Mr. Miyagi's like, you are learning how to tattoo. It's like,
Yes, you are.
so
Yeah, it really is, and I think today because of technology, and these aren't bad things, you know what I mean? Like technical evolution and progression in tattooing is so important, and I'm all for it. You know what I mean? I don't know if you remember this, but tattooing back in those days, people were saying tattooing was over 20 years ago.
oh
You know
yeah.
what I mean? Like the things that people say today, I'm like, I've heard this before 20 years ago.
I'm gonna call out my editor right now, my podcast editor, because he told me, so I've known him since I was 16, but I remember him being like, tattoos are a fad. What are you gonna do when they go out of style? And I was like, what? Look at us now, Scott, calling you out. He's gonna hear this when he goes to edit this.
It's also
But
prehistoric.
yeah, it's been
It is
around
crafted up
for a
individual.
while.
Well, and that's kind of this idea, this concept. So when we get into social media, we get into more, you know, this industry, the scene, the way it's evolved. It's not necessarily good or bad. It can be both from my experience. It depends on how it's wielded, right? It's
Yeah.
just they're all tools. It depends on how you wield them. So tools are essentially neutral, you know, until you decide how you to utilize them. But I think when it comes from learning, like today, because there's so much access to so many artists, so many seminars, so much, which is not a bad thing, but nothing's standardized. Everything is very like it's. I feel like right now in tattooing, it's kind of in an upward chaotic moment of like, you know, how do we turn this once very isolated trade into something that's more like accessible to everybody. So there's going to be a lot of growing pains. Like a lot of people forget that like to be a lawyer was once an apprenticeship trade. Now you
Really?
have to go through our higher education, the bar, everything. Yeah, it was once an apprenticeship based trade. You learned the law by apprenticing under a lawyer.
Huh,
You
I
know
didn't
what
know
I
that. That's
mean?
cool.
Yeah, a long, 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 long time ago. But
Yeah.
these things have, they're not just birthed the way that in their full form. They go through a very long progression, and it's not necessarily, like I said, good or bad. But I feel like the industry and where we're at right now are those growing pains. There's a lot of conversations, a lot of debate, and this overarching issue that I see consistently that kind of as my age, and I don't know how if you feel this way, but someone who's been tattooing for as long as we have, I kind of sit back and I'm just like these are the same conversations. And you can try to own tattooing, you can try to put it in a box, you can try to be an authority, but at the end of the day, no one is. You can be like a heavy influence, you can have a lot of experience, wisdom, and skills to teach, but nobody owns it at the
Right.
end of the day. You know what I mean? Like this concept that there's a table that's higher up that like, decides who is and isn't good or available, or you know what I mean? Like it doesn't exist. Like there are
Yeah.
people tattooing everything and anything. There's every type of tattooer for every type of person. Like if you know what I mean? It's if you produce what you produce, people are going to come to you, and at the end of the day that's more what it's about, and so no one can own it. And I see that happen a lot from the TV shows to everything, is that people tend to try to own it and be the
Hmm.
authority, the voice, and it's like it doesn't exist.
Yeah. Because it's all your perception. It's art.
It is.
Who's, that was always my issue. Did you go to art school?
So I did, but after my apprenticeship.
Oh, really? Okay.
So
That's,
again, I went into it like I kind of did things a little backwards.
hmm.
So I got like a taste of tattooing for years as a trade skill before I went to art school. And I was
Okay.
like, I'll give art school a try. And then when I got into that, I was like, no way.
Yeah. I never, I think I took one art class in high school and decided, fuck this. I'm not going to be graded on how I create art like that. I had such a problem with that because I'm like, who the fuck are you to say what's good art? But at the same time, I'm that person that's like, that's trash, you know? But you know what I mean? Like it's all your perception. It's all like objective. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So
That's why when I agree, and I approach like when I teach or mentor like in apprenticeships or seminars and stuff, one of the things that I'll say is that like when I one-on-one with someone, ultimately like it's skill first and art second. There is an art to it, but there's also a skill to it, but that doesn't mean that there isn't an art to the skill. You know what
right,
I mean? Like applying a tattoo clean consistently can be an art in itself. So there's a skill aspect to it, and then there's an art aspect to it. But it is all subjective to a degree. You know what I mean? Like we can argue the merits of like what is a good and not good tattoo, but it depends on, again, your perspective. What are you judging on? So, like, when you see shows that do these things, what they do is kind of like this. If you watch or pay attention, they have to put in a mix of technical skill levels so that the average person can see a great contrast between
hmm,
good and bad, because otherwise it's subjective. When
right,
you have a ton of masters all together, how do you decide who's a winner?
right,
You
yeah,
can't,
hmm,
because it's all subjective. Like what are you judging on at the end of the day when everything's technically applied correctly, but with multiple different styles on multiple different skin types? You can't.
yeah. Yeah, admittedly, I've never watched Ink Master.
Why
Well,
not?
okay, I
I loved
watched
it.
I watched one season, and that's because I used to work for someone who was on the show, and I watched his season. But other than that, I remember when Miami Ink came out, and I watched the first episode and was like, what the fuck? This isn't even about tattooing. I was
No.
like so disappointed. It was like the drama, and I was like, oh, come on. And then it was like all of my clients all of a sudden know everything about tattooing and they're in on it. And I noticed, I don't know if you noticed this, but the shift in people all of a sudden dumping their entire life story on you for their tattoo. And it was like overnight where people would get their tattoo. You might hear what it means or what it's about, but then it was about like people would come in and tell you their story first and their idea next
Mhm.
because that's what they were being trained to do with Miami Ink and like all of those shows. So I was immediately like turned off to like the reality like tattoo shows. So like I never watched them, but I did interview for Ink Master. Halfway through the interview, I was like, this is not for me. I'm not your person. Because I felt like they were trying to put me into a character.
Mhm.
And like we're trying to see like what kind of drama was I going to spin. And I'm like, I'm not a drama person. So I'm like, I don't think so. I don't want to do this. So I like bailed halfway through the interview. But I know a lot of people who've been on the show and it's really interesting to me. Like, I know that it's got to be really taxing, emotionally, mentally, like probably zaps your confidence or any confidence that you had going in there because they are brutal. And I can't even imagine living through that. But then also having to be judged by people, especially like being judged by someone who doesn't even do tattoos, like that's got to be so rough. But
Well, I think for me, like especially like as time goes on, like my memories of my experience as I've grown as a person has also grown too. You know what I mean? Like that's something I've noticed a lot is that like what I took from that experience has been different in the evolution of my own life and career as an artist as I've grown. We can do that a lot throughout our life, and I really went for the experience and for the fun, and it did, for a lot of reasons, push me in good ways and in negative ways. You know what I mean? And I think certain people are cut out for it because of the way that the nature that it is a show. You know what I mean? Ultimately, it's a show and it's a competition show. I can't talk about a lot of the details of what they do or how they do. I'm legally not allowed to. Uh, but it is all put together in this way. And but as an artist going into it, and every show is different. Every artist's experiences are different. There aren't any guarantees, but there's no guarantees in life. Like whether or not it's going to propel you forward, how it's going to affect you, what it's going to do for you. Going into it, the season that I did not expect to end up on the season that I did with the girls that I did. And so, I had a lot of fun. And I still think the tattoo I went on home on was falsely judged. I will hold true to this day. And actually, fortunate, I got to the tattoo I went home on was a pinup, and the guy who got it, it was of his wife, and he vehemently loved that tattoo and was always just like loved it. He had written about it on Reddit, and unfortunately, he did pass away, and
oh,
his
so sad.
wife came to me to get a like similar kind of memorial piece for him as Batman.
Oh,
And
is it this? Okay, so I just looked it up. Is it it's the purple and black like a Catwoman pinup?
that's
No?
the pinup
Oh.
that I went home on. Yeah, that's
Oh,
her.
okay, yeah, yeah.
So,
That's
but
what I figured.
compared to what I went home to, come on.
Yeah. So
Um,
cute.
uh, the photograph is actually like it's on the calf, so it's angled differently.
Mm-hmm.
So the bottom of the picture looks shorter, but in person it's not. That's
Yeah.
the other thing is that like a photograph of some like if someone we don't take our photographs on the shows. Someone
Right.
else does.
Oh, hate
So,
that. Oh my
but
God.
anyways, and I got to gift that to her for free, and that was a really special moment, but for me and her.
Yeah, that's really sweet.
And I was really like when she reached out to me, I was really really happy that she did.
Yeah.
It was just it was really cool. So because I kind of believe in those kind of cyclical connections.
Yeah.
But, at the time, it's like, I think Instagram was really kind of coming up at the same time. So it was like a lot of timing for me. And it was also my first experience being thrust into this more spotlight when at the end of the day, it's like I still feel, even to this day, like I'm just a tattooer. And like my love and my passion is tattooing, and my love and my passion is also teaching. And like when you boil it down at the end of the day, why do I tattoo? Like if I ask myself that question, and I think a lot of people should, and they don't ask themselves enough throughout every change or aspect or moment of their career, like why do I tattoo? Why do I do this? Be honest with themselves, and then would you do it for nothing? And if the answer is yes, would you tattoo for nothing in exchange? And the answer is yes, then you're in the right place. You know what I mean? Because you're doing it for the love of what you're doing, love of the craft, love of what you're doing, how it impacts other people, however you find that. But if you would do it for nothing in exchange, you're in the right place.
Yeah, I love
I
that.
think that's my philosophy and my belief system. And sometimes I have to check myself and ask myself what I'm doing, why I'm doing it.
Yeah, and I think about that often because I do get, I'm sure you get the same people asking for apprenticeships daily.
Mhm.
Want an apprenticeship.
In 20 years, I've only done four.
Yeah, I've only done one so far. Well, I guess one and a half. It didn't, the second one didn't
Well,
work out,
technically
but
only three. One, I we never got to tattooing because I had to
yeah.
let them go because some things aren't good fits. That's the other thing too,
Yeah.
is that like when you go into an apprenticeship, like they're hard to get, number one, and I think it's important to realize why. Why are
Hmm.
they hard to get? No artist is under any obligation to turn around and teach somebody what they know, and there is this inherent, in general, I'm teaching my potential competition.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
That's just the way the world is, you
Yeah.
know? So like, do you teach because you need help? Like, so let's wind it back a little bit. The original, let's just wind it back a little bit. Not like far back in ancient times of tattooing or different cultures of tattooing, where I think apprentices had a very different role. But like in more modern day, post-industrial era apprentices, why did you have them? Because that was the functioning of a studio. You know what
Hmm.
I mean? Like apprentices learned the craft in exchange for helping a studio function. And they were a vital part of that studio. And so there was this kind of exchange, kind of thing for a tattoo artist to focus on the clients and their work, creating the art, a lot of drawing that went into anything before iPads existed, all of this, right? And then and so they're learning the skill that way. Once we started progressing in tattooing like in a technical level, and we take away the cords, we take away the power source, we take away, making our own needles, we take away making our own pigments, we take away making our own machines. What is an apprentice to do to be a part of that shop? You're no longer having to sterilize your own equipment. Everything is bought, everything is wireless. So then all you have left is skill. There's almost nothing in exchange. So then how do you implement an apprentice into your studio when they're no longer a vital part of the functioning of a studio and it's simply to teach? So
Right.
that has to have a big pivot, which means that apprenticeships can be even harder to get. There might be more tattooers in the world, so maybe there's more opportunities, but there's less of an exchange. So that's where you get into people now charge, like school,
Hmm.
or they do work exchange. You know what I mean? If someone can't afford it. But that's another part where we're in tattooing right now, which is like, how do you put a value on it?
Yeah.
And a lot of people, I think, when they get into tattooing, they don't realize what the value is. You know what I mean? They think that it is just art when it's not, right? It's art and skill. And there's a lot of responsibility that an artist has when taking someone on in their studio. A lot of liability. There's, because it's procedural too. There's a lot of things. And so, people not a part of it tend to, I've noticed, treat it as something of low value, but it's not. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like it has the same value as any higher education, as any college education. It's a
Yeah.
whole career that you
Hmm.
can take anywhere in the world and hone and dedicate yourself to.
Yeah. And
And
something I was going to say earlier was when you were talking about going through the progression of being a female, apprentice and then artist and then shop owner and educator and mentor. So it's like when they're not, when they haven't passed a certain point, they don't get it. They don't see it from the other side. So coming in, knowing nothing about the industry, they don't see it from our perspective where we've put 21 years in and we've done all the things and we've made all the mistakes and we're handing them over the shortcut
yep.
to where, my apprentice is she's basically from what she doesn't have as much experience. She's still going to run into situations and things where she's going to need my help and have questions, but as far as skill wise, she's on the same level as me already. She's been tattooing a year and I'm
Oh,
like, Okay.
My apprentice Eli, who graduated, he's been with me for 2 years, and as I'm making shifts in my life, I just gave him the private studio we had, and hands down best apprentice I've ever had in my life. I've never met someone so dedicated. His fourth tattoo is better than most 10-year
Yeah.
tattooers. And
Same.
and when I saw it, I was like, fuck you.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I'm like, I hope I helped you with that. Because I'll always tell him, like his what he produces is his hard work. All I do is guide, you know what I mean? And we did. It's a lot of that, like, and there it's a lot of work. I'm not saying there isn't. Like, he's with me every step of the way. He followed me all over the place. Like, every shop I was at, like, through my methods, and like and like he worked he it's like, what am I trying to say? Like, I gave him every single leg up that I had to fight tooth and nail for over 20 years.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, and so I'm giving him the rope ladder down the mountain, so he doesn't have to spend 10 years climbing that mountain,
Right.
which is, I think, a lot, like you said, exactly, like a lot of people don't see it from the other side.
Right.
How much work went into getting to where you are and that inherent value. And there is a want to pass that on. You know what I mean? Like, for me at least, like, I love it. I love watching other people. And I think he said to me, like, once, like, because we've never really talked about a lot of personal stuff. Everything between us has always been really, really tattooing. And I was like, when he got to the end, I was just like, I hope I was a good teacher to you. And I think he said something along the lines of, like, you changed my life. You gave me a trade that I can use forever, and again, it's like he's going to run into little things, little problems, but he's not going to have to spend 10 years mastering line work.
Right.
how to get
I
how
feel
to
that
get
in my
pigment
soul.
how to get pigment in consistently
Yeah.
every time on every part of the body. And even then it's a gamble because every client is different, like, you know what I mean? Like, it used to take us, sometimes decades, a decade to get to where people can get to now within like a year or two.
Yeah, and it's all about the mentor as well, because not everyone who tattoos
No.
can teach. And that's like another thing that people don't consider, where it's like, just because I have the knowledge doesn't mean that I can,
Articulate it.
yeah, explain it to you how, you're gonna receive it. And so that's what I think took me so long to take on an apprentice in the first place, is because I was not confident that I could say what it goes through my mind when I do a tattoo. And I learned personally so
Yeah.
much from teaching.
Yeah.
And because I had to then be like, I don't know what I do. What do I do? And then I have to
Right.
sit there and analyze what I'm doing so I
Breaking
can
it
explain
down.
it. And then, oh, now that I know what I'm doing, now I can create some kind of system in my mind for doing this like more
Yeah.
efficiently. So like I became a better tattooer for teaching, which is really
Yeah.
an unexpected bonus from it.
It is. It really is. Breaking it down. It does make you kind of go back to the basics too, where you're relearning things. Like, you're like, okay, well, how would I explain what I do or my methods to somebody? And then you go backwards and you're like, I might refine that a little bit or change that
Yeah.
a little bit. Or like when you're explaining to someone, you're like, how, like, okay, that so you're absolutely right in that aspect. There's a value both ways. In I think when we're where we're at as in an industry is this, again, like, kind of like everything's up in the air and we don't really know how things are going to settle, as far as like teaching, education, seminars, mentors, mentorships, apprenticeships. And again, it's like I've done a lot of skill sharing. So there are two things that kind of happened before I ever taught anybody. And I waited a long time too. So I don't think my first apprentice wasn't until I'd been over 10 years in tattooing. That was something that was kind of ingrained in me too in our era, was like, you didn't open a shop and you didn't apprentice until you hit 10 years. I
Yeah.
don't know if you were taught that way, but
I
that
don't
was
know
like,
that anyone said that to me, but in my
it was like
mind,
common.
that's the answer, you know.
Yeah, it was like 10 years. Like, it would take that long to be decent. And the industry, quote unquote, again, would be, it's just a community, right? there's no like higher ups that decide, you know what I mean? Like, but it's a community, and at that time it was a rough community. You know what I mean? Like if you weren't like part of your local community to some degrees, like you face a lot of backlash, and you still do. It's just different now. Instead of people throwing bricks and burning down your shop, they go online and try to tear down or cancel you. So
Yeah.
we're facing a new, it's the virtual baseball bat rather than the
Yeah.
physical one. But it's always been
It's
around from the
yeah.
beginning. Competition can be a nasty beast in our industry for sure, and it's been rearing its ugly head a lot lately online. And that's something that I, again, on the other side of things, looking back, it's like I want to hand knowledge back in these ways. And I don't know if I got off topic there because I
No, you're
can,
fine.
I'm a babbler and a rambler.
There's no rules here. We're
Yeah,
just going with the flow.
but
But
um but
but
yeah, still share.
let's talk about cancel culture because
Ooh.
um
Yes.
yeah,
Have
so
you made it? Okay, that's the new like bar I joke with. Like, have you really made it if someone hasn't tried to cancel you or you haven't been canceled at least once? I mean, come on.
yeah, it's I mean, I have had my share of negative comments, but nothing super overwhelming that I couldn't just try and brush off. But yeah, there's this whole other, evil side of the internet where, someone talks a bunch of shit about you and no one's checking to see if it's true. No one's checking, for facts. They're just like, "Oh my God, I heard this and that person's a piece of shit. Let's cancel." And it gets overwhelming. It gets out of control. How because you've kind of been dealing with that.
Hmm.
How do you deal with that?
There
Where
again,
tell
and
us how like how to start steps A through C, how to get through cancel.
well, again, like I do think that I hope once I can, obviously, like I have an ongoing legal case I can't speak openly about, but I can talk about it in general terms and before because it's the internet in general. And I can talk about my beliefs. Um, and again, like it's experience that I'll be able to one day hopefully hand down of like how to handle things, how not to handle things in general from negativity. And a lot of it is that like so when I first like did the shows, that was my first experience with getting like a lot of negativity, a lot of positivity too, but negativity from complete strangers. You know, critiquing my work, critiquing my face. You know what I mean? Like and at that time I remember being like, what is wait, what? Like that's like how rude. You know what I mean? Like you wouldn't say that to me in person. Like
Right.
but you feel safe and fine to say it online because you don't have to face a person. You're not looking at me as a human being or a person. You
Right.
know what I mean? And that's the big disconnect and the problem, right? So like do you have the balls to take a baseball bat to somebody's body? No, not
Right.
necessarily. And we have decades of case law that say that you can't do that, right?
Right.
But the internet people utilize as a baseball bat to get what they want, and we haven't caught up. Nor
Right.
are we even recognizing what's happening, you know? And I was guilty of this, like with the podcast I did with Teresa when Tattoo Gate happened. I intellectualized what happened from Russ and the people that were part of that without seeing the person behind it.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't, we talked about, and I'm pretty sure we talked a lot about like the industry standards, things like that. We didn't speak a lot personally, but there's this concept called ad hominem, which is when you make or when you attack someone personally rather than their belief systems or their practices. You know what I mean? Like we can talk about practices, we can talk about belief systems, we can talk about structures, but you don't undermine that person as a person because you forget that there's humanity there unless there's like these obvious extremes, right? That we can
Right.
say, you know, like that's bad, that's bad, that's morally wrong. You know what I mean? Like we can all agree on these like bigger topics. But a lot of it is noise, but it can be overwhelming. So like if you're walking through the internet and you're having a bad day and you something someone posts or something's happening and you don't like it and you make a comment that's negative. What you might not realize is that that person behind that, that might be the millionth comment.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like a million cuts. And we see it all the time. People take their own lives. And it impacts people to the point where they lose their jobs, custody of their children, their relationships, their careers, everything over noise. That's essentially modern day witch trial. It's
Right.
the inverse of the law. So online, you are guilty until proven innocent, no matter what. And it's up to you to prove your innocence, where the law is the reverse. And and in the internet, it's like the memory is 2 seconds. Like
Yeah.
anybody can cut and paste and twist and turn a story to any narrative. Where I've learned in the case of the law, the entire story and truth is laid out from beginning to end, and you can't do the same things, and then things are decided what is fact, what is not fact.
Right.
So you have to be very careful. I've learned on the internet today, and especially when it comes to gossip, rumors, or so ever, or for whatever, to be very careful about what people are saying because you just don't know. You really don't. And I've witnessed and experienced a connection with a lot of tattooers who had reached out to me through my stuff being like, this is why I don't teach, which is a
Mm-hmm.
shame. They're
Yeah.
like, I won't expose myself with today's current climate. Other artists who are incredible artists who've gone through their own things, who have been forced to, you know, put out publicly their private lives when something should be, these things should go to the proper places. You know what I mean? Whether that's court or, you know, like in order to save their careers,
Right.
you know, and in a way it's freeing, but it's also horrible. Like when you know, 100 strangers are telling you to take your own life and you don't
Oh
even
my
know
gosh.
why, you're like, oh, maybe I
Yeah.
should.
And
Like,
and
what?
the thing is, like, you could have 100 positive comments,
Hmm.
you get two negative comments. That's what you remember. Like we're just like conditioned
We
to
are
see these
hardwired.
things, and it's like,
We're hardwired that way. Yeah, it's sad. Um,
unfortunately, they don't outweigh the negative comments, and especially if you are someone who already struggles with, your you know, state of mind and just your confidence and you know,
that was the biggest thing. So, like, first of all, like a lot of the time, I just remain silent. Like that was the best advice I was ever given is to never respond.
absolutely.
Um, unless you absolutely have to. You know what I mean? Is to try to be as silent as possible. Because all you're doing is fueling a fire. And eventually that fire will burn out, you know, and then you do kind of controlled burns on the back end, which is that if someone's creating, committing any crimes or breaking any laws, you know, retain legal. The unfortunate thing is a lot of people don't always think about having the funds for that or that avenue, which is available for them. And then the other thing is, I remember my biggest thing was I got to such a point of like just the barrage of everything, where I had this realization where it was like I have a 21 plus year career. I have support from all my pro teams and sponsors. I have a strong family support. I have a strong community support and friend support. And this is so hard that I couldn't imagine if anybody out there who had a young mind or was lacking of any of those things, what they would do.
Yeah.
Because it can push you, and then you start to gaslight yourself about your own experiences, about whatever's going on, whatever situation. And what I found is that there were certain individuals because I'm a human being and because we're all people and sometimes we don't get along with other people or we just don't like each other. You don't, you know what I mean? Like, for whatever reasons, took the opportunity to like make it worse.
Right.
Just tell me like, how they felt. And it's just, it's like, I don't know. At the end of the day, you're like, I kept trying, I always, because the way I was raised, it was always this like thing that I was told, which was like always stay curious. So it's like, okay, so what can I learn from this? What can I glean from this? What can I get from this that I could use to help others, to protect myself, to protect others? And I got a lot. And I hope one day to give that back.
What do you think the biggest thing that you learned from this whole thing was?
There for in the world of the internet, especially like let's apply it just for tattooing for our listeners, for you and tattooers. There's a lot of places where we're exposed, and there are protections to be put in place. And a lot of it is figuring out how to cut out toxic environments and toxic people with with utilizing protections in a legal sense. So mutual NDAs, which goes both ways. So like if you own a studio and you have mutual NDAs with your shop and stuff like that, it creates a protective environment for everybody. So everybody like if you leave the shop for any reason, we're never going to say anything about you. That's it. Because everybody has the right to start over. Everybody has the right to move on.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody has that right. And we're not going to drag you back, hold you back. You know what I mean? Whatever happens, it's protected. Same goes for when you leave a shop. That shop has the right to maintain its place. So you just walk away. It just creates a sense of protection for that, you know?
I feel
Um,
like that type of like any kind of contracts, agreements, stuff like that is so um what's the word? Like in the tattoo industry, people don't want it. It could
they,
be in their
nope,
best interest. It
they don't
could
want it.
be
They
more
don't.
beneficial for them than me, and they don't want
Well, that's the thing is that you
it.
don't want
It's
something until you need it. And then you wish you had
right,
it.
exactly. Yeah.
And you're
Yeah.
like, oh,
Yep.
both ways.
Yeah.
But that's the world. See, that was the eye-opening thing for me is like that's the world we're in now. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? Like that's the game that we're all participating in when you put yourself out there. And when you put yourself out there, like you do have to protect yourself. You know what I mean? When you have created a career, and that's kind of where I'm at. And I still haven't figured out exactly like the end game of for how I feel about it. This is just where I'm at in my process of it. Which is that like, you know, there is a lot of exposure and at the end of the day, like when you're a successful artist, like it is just you. It's just you and your reputation and the work that you produce, right? That you've worked really hard for. And then the avenues of the progression of where we're at is in a society and how you put that out there to run your business, to live your life, to build on your career. If that's lost or gone or damaged or you lose for any reason whatsoever, and you find yourself defenseless, like people don't think about those things. And it's like, and it can happen to anybody. That's the other thing is that
Mm-hmm.
it can literally happen to anyone at any time. You run into the wrong person. We've all done this before. We've all had bad mentorships. We've all had bad apprentices. We've all had bad apprenticeships. We've all had bad seminars. We've all had bad clients. We've also had all great, you know what I mean? But there are those things that do happen because we don't live in a world that's perfect. And like it's the same with making mistakes. Mistakes are normal and part of being human and part of growing, and learning. But everyone has the right to learn from those mistakes and move forward. And then, you know, if you can, again, we can take this back to applying it to teaching and in apprenticeships and mentorships and stuff. Is that you're learning from my mistakes. I'm going to tell you where, you get to skip all of the like, however long it took me to get to this point when I'm telling you, like, this is the way you should do things, or this is the way I do things. Like, you're skipping all these levels. But we're getting more and more as again, like, and we're like just now kind of having these conversations, but tattooing is becoming more and more corporate. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? Like, there are studios that are cropping up where there's a bunch of them. They have HR departments now, and it's like these are businesses that artists are working for that I promise you, they protect themselves. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, and they're not the ones producing the work nor out there, right?
Right.
There's
Yep.
just a shop, but there's people behind that shop. There's boards behind these things. You know what I mean? And so, like, you have to look at yourself as one singular artist operating within this realm in this world. There is a lot of vulnerabilities there, and like, how do you protect yourself? And, like, when it comes to the internet and online, like, if you get attacked in any way, people's first instinct is to defend themselves publicly, to go on the offensive or the defensive or whatever. And my advice is no, to say nothing and to
Yeah.
continue to live your
I
life
agree.
and handle things how they need to in the back end. And the reason why is because there's a cognitive bias that can happen. And there's something that is called I think it's called the priority effect. Oh, I can't remember the name. It's a something effect, but it's actually hardwired in us biologically that regardless of the truth, regardless of proof, people are hardwired to believe a story they hear first, no matter what. And that's why children will run to their parents and yell and talk over each other to tell their story first.
Right.
And so, I can't remember, the primacy effect is what it's called.
Okay.
And we have to battle that all the time online, you know what I mean? Because once, unfortunately, you start to become successful, you're up for grabs. Because whether it's competition or whatever, it's like people will attack you from all angles. You know what I mean? Like, if they can't criticize your work, they'll criticize your looks, especially if you're a woman. If they can't criticize your looks, they'll criticize your work. If they
Right.
can't criticize both, they'll go for your character, your morals. Like, some people just do that. I don't know why. I'm glad I don't know why.
Yeah.
um, but I think for me, like, I've gone through a lot of it. Like, there was a lot of rumors going around about me faking cancer, and it got
Oh.
brought up uh, during a lot of the internet stuff. And it got to a point where I was getting DMs from artists that were like, this person's sending me this, saying this about you. And it's all about faking cancer, which to me was heartbreaking, because number one, who would do that? Number two, if you're going to accuse someone of that, you better have some proof. That's
Yeah,
a pretty
seriously.
serious accusation. And so it got to a point where it was so bad that I was like, you know what? My mental and emotional health is way more important than my privacy. So I posted my
Right.
medical records online. It's on my Instagram right now. And I made a statement about it because I was like, this is wrong.
Yeah. I mean,
Here you go.
it sucks that you had to do that, but to be brave enough to do that, I
I
mean,
cried for an hour after I made that post.
I'm sure.
But then, because I wasn't expecting people to be positive, it wasn't.
Yeah.
I was expecting more backlash, but I needed it to stop because
Yeah.
I was like, my whole life, my whole body changed like that. You know what I mean? My ability to have children, like my whole life changed from that experience. And I'm not going to let rumors take away my story,
Yeah.
that's mine with or without tattooing, but it, like, changed my whole life and put me in a different path. Um, but the
And you were
response I
so
got,
young. You were so young when that happened. You were
yeah,
what, 31? I think I
I
read.
was 30, 31, yeah. So like
That's
mid-year. Yeah. So, um, and so then when I posted that, then people stopped because it was like too far, You know what I mean? Like being doxxed and having phone numbers and addresses and stuff published was scary enough, but like the other stuff was way more emotionally damaging to me, where I was like, I'm not doing this anymore.
Yeah.
Here's my medical records. Kind of fuck you, have fun. That was my way of like trying to take my power back. And again, after that, just continuing to live my life and continuing to tattoo and feeling incredibly grateful to have such a core clientele of people I've worked with for so long, you know, and then that's the other thing is that I have always kind of taken on this clientele of people who have chronic illnesses. So I tattoo a lot of people with chronic illnesses or have gone through cancer treatment or survivors because I get it. You know what I mean? Like, it's like if they have to move an appointment, cool. You know what I mean? If they have to schedule on me last minute, cool. You know what I mean? Like, I get it. I understand. And we're drawn to that. So, again, sorry if I'm rambling and getting off topic.
No, you're fine. You're fine.
But
What
the
do you
best,
think is something that's kept you grounded throughout all of these challenges that you've been through?
honestly, my family. I'm really lucky. Like my family has been close and not close throughout my entire life. We're all very different and we're all kind of like out of the home very young and but we all talk a lot, you know, like independence and self reliance was very encouraged in my family very young. And then my client, I mean, I know it sounds cliche and cheesy, but my clients, like I love the people I work on, the projects that I have, the conversations we have, working with them through their journeys. Like I love it. You know what I mean? And it's that it comes back to that question because I almost quit tattooing. I was like, do I even want to do this anymore? Like, what has this become? I don't know. I don't recognize the home that I've always called home anymore. And then it was like, well, I have to finish these projects I've started. And I didn't know. I was kind of sitting on the fence about a lot of stuff, didn't know where I was going to go. And it really was like these projects, these clients I've been working on that come in and have these like, you know, would just give me hugs and be like, dude, I know you. I've known you for years. I've worked with you for years. Like, you know, like all of that, like really like propped me up when I was, and then realizing that it's like, and even my sponsors and the pro teams that I'm on, they were right there with me and like, you know, known you forever, worked with you forever. Like, so it really came down to support and people, you know, the support and people being positive and being like, you know what, like, this is just life. Things happen. We're here for you. And then it's again, it's that nose to grindstone, just kind of like taking the time to reevaluate everything and then go back to that. Why do I tattoo? You know, and then thinking realistically about quitting and then being like, I'll just go into early retirement, right? And then I was like, but if I early retire, I'm still going to tattoo because I love tattooing. I love it. I
So
love
why
my
retire?
clients. And then I'm like, but then that's not really quitting or retiring. So nah,
Yeah, that's funny.
guess I'll
Yeah,
just keep
so
tattooing.
all right, guys, that's it for today's episode. I hope you're feeling inspired and ready to make some moves today. Remember, it's all about showing up, putting in the work, and staying true to yourself. If you got something out of today's episode, share it with a friend who might need to hear it, and make sure to subscribe so we can keep this momentum going. Get updates on all of our latest episodes, events, and more by following us on social media at Bound by Art Project and by heading over to the website boundbyart.com. Thanks for hanging out and putting up with my shit. I'll see you next time. Now shut up, quit making excuses, and go get better.